All right, well, welcome back to the Best Facts Apologetics Answers show. I'm continuing my interview with Dr. Lydia McGrew, and we are talking right now about her book, The Mirror or the Mask, and fictionalizing literary devices, something that she argues against in this book. So we just discussed reasons to disregard fictionalizing literary devices, but I also want to ask about your book, The Mirror or the Mask. Do you have any positive evidence for the reliability of the Gospels in the book?
Yeah, and I think that's really important that I do have positive evidences. If you get hold of the book, you'll see it's a big book. And when I was planning it, I remember someone said to me, nobody's going to want to read a 500-page negative book, but it's not. So although I deal very thoroughly answering the arguments that the gospel authors made these factual changes, then I have a whole section on reasons to think that they were reliable historically in a more garden variety sense. Back in our early segment, I used the phrase making common sense rigorous, and I talked about taking a common sense approach and then defending it in a scholarly, rigorous way. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here, reasons to just read them in a straight fashion, that they're not changing things. And why should we think that? So I have a lot of positive evidence. I'm just going to name two kinds that I talk about in The Mirror of the Mask right here in this segment. One of them is what I call unique personalities. And I use Peter as an example in The Mirror or the Mask. And I talk about the way that you have all these different stories about him across the different gospels, and yet they all show that same personality coming through. And that's remarkably hard to do. If you binge watch television shows, I think you see that when you get different show writers, they'll sometimes kind of change their presentation of the characters, even though you might think it would be easy for them to make them consistent, but they're not particularly trying to. But when you read the Gospels, you find them telling all different stories about, in this case, Peter, and yet you get that same sense of that same guy he loves Jesus very much, but he's also kind of a big mouth and impulsive, and he argues with Jesus, but he always does it out of this heart of love, and rushes in where angels fear to tread, as it were, and then gets himself in literally over his head when he starts to sink on the Sea of Galilee and so forth. And they all fit together. And one of these is one of these great little details in John, when they see Jesus on the shore after he's risen from the dead. It says that Peter jumped into the water, to swim to land. He couldn't wait till the boat would get to land. But it's also got this little detail. It says he put his coat on. And Leon Morris is a John scholar. I mean, he's dead now, but was a John scholar. And he notes that seems a little surprising. Like, if you were going to swim, why would you put your coat on? But John notes it was because Peter didn't, it says he was stripped for work, so he might have been completely naked, and he didn't want to appear before Jesus that way, and he was a fisherman, so he could swim with his outer garments on, so he puts it on before he jumps in. It's just one of those little notes of realism in John, and it also fits with this personality of Peter. Mary and Martha are similar. We've got stories about them in John, and then the different famous story in Luke, and you see that their personalities are the same, but in different ways. So besides unique personalities, another thing I do is I discuss evidence for Luke's speeches and the accuracy of Luke's speeches in the book of Acts, like his reporting Paul's speeches. And then that's meant to reflect on his honesty in reporting Jesus' teaching in the book of Luke, because it's written by the same author. And I'm relying there on Colin Hemer's work on the books of Acts in the setting of Hellenistic history, but also some older works from the 19th century. And I'm bringing their discussions in there as to how we can tell that Luke's reporting of speeches is very it's very accurate. And this is important because Luke might have had a Greek education, and yet even that higher level Greek education that he might have had did not apparently teach him that it was okay to make up speeches, or if it did, he ignored it, and he reported them accurately. So those are two kinds of evidence, of the positive evidence I bring forward in The Mirror or the Mask, and there's much more, so be sure to get a hold of a copy.
A book that I'd direct our viewers to, or a few books on the topic would be Dr. Craig Keener's work on Acts. And he shows us a just unbelievable amount of evidence for the historicity of Luke and his authorship. That was definitely a highlight. I've also gotten to interview Dr. Craig Keener in the past and have just appreciated some of that corroboration of Luke, like you're mentioning here. All right, well, thank you so much. We have...
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I was going to say, if you can get hold of that book by Colin Heemer, if your reader, anybody can get hold of that I just mentioned, the Book of Acts in the Setting of Hellenistic History. I believe it's still in print. It's a little expensive, but I believe it's still in print. My faith has been very strengthened by that book and by all the lists of evidences. And Heemer is a scholar. So I really recommend that book.
Excellent. All right. Well, we have a few more questions left, and those will be coming up on our next videos.